Rainworld's Watcher DLC finally came out, and it was an enormous disappointment. And if the Steam reviews are anything to go by, then I'm not alone in thinking this. So let's talk about it, shall we? This first part will have as few spoilers as possible. The best way I can describe my distaste for this DLC without spoiling anything is that it feels extremely disjointed. The regions feel completely unrelated to anything you'd find in the base game or Downpour. The story also feels completely unrelated to anything you've seen before. The visuals are awesome, and the new creature designs, for the most part, look awesome, but it lacks any substance. The gameplay quality just doesn't match the visual quality, and all of the lore, again, just feels irrelevant. You know how in the base game there's like the religious side of the lore? In The Watcher, the entire story, top to bottom, is all about this cryptic stuff, and even if you find that part of the story really interesting, the result of focusing the entire story on just that part means that the story you get told makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I can't imagine that even the most dedicated lore nerds are going to be able to glean anything from the Watcher's story outside of like pure speculation based on visuals and 3 lines of dialogue or whatever. But to be fair, the Watcher isn't all bad. The gameplay gimmick of the Watcher isn't too intrusive, so the gameplay in parts does feel like regular Rainworld in ways that even the Downpour DLC didn't. And I do prefer that over the characters that have like, you know, crazy superpowers or whatever. And again, the visuals and the music and the creature design and the vibes are all really on point, even when the gameplay doesn't really match that quality. But honestly, that's about as much as I can say without spoiling anything. The DLC is so different from anything we've seen before in Rainworld that it's very hard to criticize it without explicitly talking about it. So let's move on to the spoiler part. At the start of The Watcher, you spawn into a new area in Industrial Complex, and when you try to go to Five Pebbles to have, you know, story stuff happen, instead, you're halted by an area that looks like this. This is a cool moment, but it also feels very modded. It feels fan-made. It's like a creepypasta written about Rainworld. So as much as this was cool, it also did feel a little bit goofy. You're forced to meet this new Echo, which will then send you back to the top of Industrial Complex, where the world will now be partially rotted. Then, when you visit 2 more Echoes, you will then get sent to a brand new region. And this is where I start to have some serious problems. See, The Watcher has 20 new regions, but they're not all actually connected to each other in the same way that the regular regions are. In regular Rainworld, the regions are connected to each other with karma gates, and the placement of each region makes logical sense in 3D space. And the region's art styles will begin to blend together as you get closer to the gate, which will signify that you're about to go from one region to another. This allows the player to make a pretty good mental map of where everything is just off of a single playthrough. But not in The Watcher. Instead, all of these new regions are completely isolated, not physically connected to each other in any way. The way you travel from one region to another is by literally teleporting to a new region. And worst of all, the location of the Echo in each new region is random. Where the Echo teleports you to is the same every time, but where that Echo actually is in the region is completely randomized. This means that you can memorize which region connects to which other region, but you can't actually know the route to get there. And there's no actual rhyme or reason as to where the Echoes will be, or where the rifts will be, unlike in the base game, where regions are connected in ways that make logical sense. And maybe more importantly, at least where the regions are in the base game doesn't change from one playthrough to another. The teleporting between regions thing just makes the entire game feel disjointed. And if you have one particular region that you want to go back to, you have to spend a ton of time doing a massive trek back through all of these dumb portals just to get there. And memorizing the path back to said region is nearly impossible. Now, the game does give you this map that shows you which region is connected to what. It's pretty confusing at first, but you can definitely get the hang of reading it after a while. But the only way to open up this map is in a shelter after you've rested. You can't open this map up in the middle of actual gameplay. So I hope your memory is really, really good, and I hope you don't find this ugly jumble of dots and lines confusing in any way. Otherwise, you're going to be really lost for a really long time. Another problem I also had was that it felt like the beginning of the DLC was setting up some cool lore drop or something, with the world you're already familiar with slowly rotting as you find more echoes. But then the game starts teleporting you around to random places, and the echo starts like saying weird shit to you, and the DLC gets so trippy in the end that it's hard to tell if any of the stuff from the start was even real to begin with, or if it was just some weird dream sequence or something. In fact, that's an issue with all of the lore in The Watcher, not just the beginning. It feels completely incoherent, because the lore is all focused on this echo that you have to keep finding in tons of different places, and they say a bunch of cryptic bullshit to you constantly that feels like it has no actual substance. And then you get teleported to a new place and you do it all over again, until eventually you're at the end, and you find the final echo, and now you're in a place that resembles a bustling city outside or something. But like, where are we? Who is the echo? Are we in an alternate dimension? Is this like time travel? Is any of what we're seeing even real in the first place? The Watcher answers none of these questions, and I've heard a lot of people compare The Watcher to the base game in terms of its vagueness, but I couldn't disagree more with this comparison. Because I understand that Rainworld is all about environmental storytelling, and I understand that it needs to be left up to your own interpretation to some extent, but The Watcher is clearly crossing a line. There's being intentionally vague, and then there's being so cryptic that practically no meaning can be derived from anything that happens at all. The Watcher is so vague that any interpretation you could possibly make of what happens in the DLC is just as likely to be true as any other interpretation, because it's so open-ended and vague that nothing really matters. Nothing's real. This doesn't make for a compelling story. It's actually mind-numbing to try and follow along, and despite what some people might say, this is not at all what the base game story is like. The base game story of Rainworld is definitely open-ended, but there are fixed plot points that can be directly observed by the player through lines of dialogue spoken by Pebbles and Moon. The game tells you explicitly about why Moon collapsed, why Pebbles is infected with rot, why the ancients aren't here anymore. It has undeniable plot points that you can latch onto, plot points that you can then build your theories around. The Watcher is all of the vagueness and all of the open-endedness of the base game, with none of the actual substance, none of the cold hard facts that can be latched onto to give the player a hint of what is or is not true about the story. And any small nugget of information that you think you can glean from the Watcher's story is just completely contradicted by information in the base game. The Daddy Longlegs and the rot is a perfect example. It goes from being an accidental, self-inflicted metaphor for cancer inside of 5 Pebbles that can't survive without its host, to being a sentient, godlike hive mind that can travel through the multiverse. Like, fuck off, what are you talking about? Anything you think you can take from Watcher's story is actively contradicted multiple times everywhere else in the Rainworld story. You have to bend over backwards so hard just to try and justify what you're seeing being real in the first place. It's all just vibes. It's just cool visuals, cool lines of dialogue, none of which actually means anything. Now, there are multiple endings to this DLC. There's the simple ending, where you just find the final echo in this one place and then leave and go into a bedroom and play with some toys or whatever. I don't fucking know. But the second ending involves this region, named the Throne. The way to access this ending is very simple, but incredibly tedious. Some of the regions in the Watcher are infected with rot. If you teleport from a rotted region to a non-rotted region, the once clean region you teleported to will also get infected by rot. If you intermittently travel back to the Throne, you will see your work has created some sort of strange creature named the Prince. To access the true ending, you need to rot every single new region and then come back to the Throne one final time to see this hideous creature you've created. Now this, to me, has the exact same problem the rest of the story does. It's a 10 out of 10 in vibes. It looks awesome. The concept is awesome. It's visually incredible. But in terms of actual substance, it makes no sense. It doesn't mean anything. This can be interpreted in so many different crazy ways that there's actually nothing to be gleaned from this in terms of an actual plot. And because of the nature of the rest of the DLC, we have no idea if any of this is even real, or if it is real, but it's like an alternate reality or something. 100% vibes, 0% story. But this ending actually highlights another problem that I had with the Watcher DLC, and that is how incredibly tedious the gameplay can be. To get this final ending, you need to endlessly backtrack to regions you've already visited, completely arbitrarily, just so you can get the ending. It takes forever to do, and it's incredibly tedious. tedious. And this tedium is made even worse by this throne region that you need to constantly revisit. This region starts out as the Outer Rim, and if you trek left for like 15 minutes straight, you eventually reach the throne. You need to do this trip multiple times to get the ending to work. It actually made me feel like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill, like I felt I was like stuck in purgatory forever. And trekking across the Outer Rim is added on top of the already time-consuming work to rot every other region. This walk, the first time you do it, is really cool, because visually this region looks great, and the suspense of what you're gonna find at the end of it is exciting. But having to do this multiple times for no reason, with no way to fast travel it, is just tedious. But even if you don't do this specific rot ending, there's still a lot of this stuff, even just in the basic ending. If you get even slightly lost, the time penalty you take for having to trek back through a bunch of bullshit portals just to get back on track is incredibly annoying. This isn't much of a big deal in the base game, because not only are the routes between regions fixed and unchanging, but they're also memorable. The way the art style blends between the gate is memorable, and you can actually open your map mid-game to look around at where you've already been to see how to get back to each gate. But this map is only available in the shelter, so you can't use this to get a bearing of where you need to go next to get back on track. And for a DLC that's seemingly designed around exploring a bunch of new regions, some of those regions are really boring to explore. A lot of them just loop back in a big circle, forcing you to go in the direction the game wants you to go in. This Outer Rim is a perfect example, actually. The throne is all the way to the left, but you can walk to the right and there's this enormous region to explore. But that region is mostly completely empty, and it all loops back around to try and make you walk to the left, because that's where the important place is. And similar to the throne, where you have to play Death Stranding for half an hour to get where you're going, there's a few other regions that do a similar thing, where they want to show you something cool, so they just force you to trek a super long distance so that you can see the cool thing in the background. And it's really cool the first time, but on repeat playthroughs, or if you accidentally teleport here again, it's just a tremendous waste of time. They called the DLC The Watcher, but they really should have called it The Walker, with how much just pointless walking there is. Now that's all the major things I dislike, but now let's get on to the more nitpicky stuff. Let's start with these little guys. I think this creature might literally be Hitler. They're these little hermit crab things, and oh my god, they're just so annoying. They just, oh my god. They cannot be killed by spears or rocks, and when you touch them, they electrocute you. And they spawn in clumps of maybe like 6 or 7 of them, and the only purpose they serve in the game is to softlock you. That's all they do. They will sit inside of a pipe and not move, completely preventing you from progressing in any way, shape, or form. If you throw a rock at one, it will start running away. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, if they run away, just throw a rocket. Just throw a rocket. It's wrong, because they spawn in big clumps. So throwing a rock at one doesn't make the rest of them move, and the rest of them will body block the one that's trying to run away and prevent it from getting out of your way. So these little freak enemies just create a blockage that you cannot realistically move under any circumstance. I actually got completely soft-locked by these enemies at one point, actually. I had no way to climb up this pipe, and the pipe down below me was completely blocked by these disgusting little gremlins. I think this negative review I found sums up my opinion on them pretty nicely, actually. There's also this new lizard type that's just, I don't know, it's just stupid. I don't know what else to say about it. I just hate it. It's dumb. Like, it shoots a giant laser out of its mouth, because, like, yeah, fucking sure, why not? Who cares? Who cares anymore? Like, yeah, I get that there's already a few absurd creatures in Rainworld, like, you know, lizards with jetpacks that can leap around and stuff. But for some reason, this one is just, it's just a step too far for me. It's like what a 13-year-old would think was a cool Rainworld enemy. And the Watcher also has an issue that I actually also think the Downpour Slugcats had too, which is that it strays very far from what I personally loved so much about the base game. I've said this many times in many videos, but in Rainworld's base game, the game really isn't about you. You're like a little slugcat surviving in a scary ecosystem, and there's this big story about ancient beings and omniscient robots, but all of that doesn't concern you. You're just a little rodent running around witnessing the story passively. You are not the main character. But in The Watcher, and also in Downpour, instead of being a small creature in a scary world, you're a godlike being who can fold called Space and Time, and you are cataclysmically important to the story. You go from being a footnote in the history of this world to being the most important creature to ever exist, who changes the entire universe for the rest of time. There's nothing inherently wrong with going in this direction, but it does stray away from what made the original Rain world so magical. But you can get away with going in this direction so long as you tell a good story, which is why I really liked Downpour, because even if I don't like the direction, it still tells a good story. But The Watcher goes in this same direction whilst failing to tell any meaningful story whatsoever. So it's a much bigger problem here than it was in Downpour. Another nitpick is that there's a lot of visual clutter in Rain World The Watcher. It looks cool at first, but then when you're in a room with a lizard and also a bunch of bullshit on the screen, it gets in the way of gameplay really badly. Now, that was a lot of negativity, but I do want to talk about the things I liked about The Watcher for a minute, because despite what I've said here, it's not all bad. The visuals are stunning all the way through. The regions all look incredible, and so do the new creature designs. The music was also incredible, as usual, but that feels like it goes without saying at this point. And most of the creature designs are actually fun to interact with too. I really like the sky whales. They're similar in function to reindeer in Farmarays, but they're a lot cooler and a whole lot less janky than the reindeer. In fact, this region has to be my favorite region from the entire DLC. It actually felt like Rain World, which most of the DLC didn't. The gameplay and exploration felt like something I'd experience in the base game, and there was a few problem-solving moments that felt like the base game too. I also liked that, for the most part, the Watcher is just a normal slug cat, at least in terms of gameplay. Like, if you ignore all of the teleporting around between regions, the Watcher is pretty much just the survivor. Yeah, you can go invisible, but this isn't nearly as game-breaking as, like, rocket jumping or flying around or anything, so you're forced to spend most of the game playing like a regular slug cat, which I really enjoyed. Also, when I said earlier that the Watcher was all vibes and no substance, I did mean that, but the vibes it's giving off are really, really cool. So many screens in so many regions look like a painting, and even if figuring out how they connect to the story is next to impossible, these set pieces are incredibly powerful. They really do instill strong emotions in you when you see them for the first time. It's just such a shame that the story surrounding these incredible set pieces feels vapid and meaningless. The Watcher DLC isn't all bad, and compared to some DLC releases I can think of, this is actually a walk in the park. The reason I'm so critical is because I love Rain World, and I think it's such a fantastic game, and it's so memorable, and I wanted the DLC to live up to the same standards that the rest of the game does, and I just think it missed the mark. It really feels like a fan creation, and not in a good way. And part of why it feels that way is because it kind of is a fan creation. Many of the regions are formerly from mods. Many of the people working on the game started out as modders. And I think you can really feel that in this DLC, because it has all of the flair of Rain World with none of the actual substance that made it so good in the first place. Now, I'm sure many of you are going to disagree with this, and if that's the case, then leave a comment and tell me why I'm wrong, because I'm really curious to see what other people think, because The Watcher has been incredibly divisive so far. But who knows, maybe the next DLC, if they even make one, will be more of what I'm looking for. Thanks for watching.